And welcome on in, everyone. Welcome to Downloadable Content live for our fourth episode here of Season 11. And I am joined by the Ron duet. We have Ron and Ronny with me tonight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hello.
We are going to be chatting all about Metroidvania games this evening. It's a fun genre. It's an awesome subject to talk about. Something we've done here on DLC in the past, where we've devoted an episode to specific genres of games, and Metroidvanias have been around for quite a while. So we figured that be a good time to chat about them. So before we,
it works out for me because it's my favorite genre.
Hey, and good, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say, but don't worry. I have the eject button right on the side of my desk. You don't know it, Ronny, but I'm going to tell you. I've fitted some ballistics and spring-loaded mechanisms to your chair.
Hey, I can't go for that long without someone to play off of. Can't just blame it on me.
I mean, you're right. I mean, yes, we are your foils, apparently. But yes.
The springboard, the bouncy ball.
Yes. But before we dive into discussion, just want to remind everyone that every single episode of Downloadable Content, all 190 episodes at this point, can be found on our website, dlcpodcast.com, and every single episode can be found also on iTunes, or Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, all the ways to get downloadable content into your ears. So it's all there. If you want to hear what we sounded like 11 years ago, you can do that.
You don't.
I mean, you can if you really want to.
But, yes, it's just one of those. It's like, I mean, yeah, you can listen to those early episodes if you want. They're all there. So, but all right. So yeah, we're going to talk about Metroidvanias tonight, and this is one of those genres that it seems to be pretty. It's one of those genres that it knows what it is, and for the most part, does it well. Like it's not
it's also a genre that's dominated in the indie space.
Absolutely. Like a lot of the games that we're probably going to be talking about have been created by indie devs, and I'm sure we've got with the three of us, I'm sure we've got quite the list.
Absolutely.
So what is a Metroidvania? If you're not familiar with the term, I will yield to Ronny, since this is his favorite genre. So I'm going to yield to Ronny here.
It's also the concept of what a Metroidvania is. I think me and Spencer debated back and forth on a previous episode. So Metroidvanias generally have two primary key components, and that is that they are inherently non-linear games. Not that there cannot be a linear story associated with them, but that there are multiple branching paths that you can go off and explore different places, and that those paths are gated through the use of lock and key abilities. And by lock and key ability, I mean there's a rock in your way. Later on, you get an ability that lets you destroy rocks. The ability to destroy rocks is the key. The rock is the lock. And that can be with anything. Oh, you need a double jump to be able to get into this. Until you get the double jump, you can't do this area. Now, you can get very creative with what those are, but those two things, between being non-linear and being gated by utility abilities, is the key components. There are other components that are commonly associated with Metroidvanias, but are not in every single one of them. Many of them have some sort of way of character progression, whether it is EXP, like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, or it's gaining new souls from Aria of Sorrow, or it's just getting new weapons and armors and stuff, such as in Metroid. But that is not a universal. Other than gaining new abilities to open up new things, progression outside of that is not universal, but it is very common. They also typically are 2D games, though I'm going to argue for a couple 3D games that fit the Metroidvania formula, even though they aren't traditionally considered Metroidvanias. But does that all make sense?
I mean,
by and large.
it makes sense to me. I think you've covered all the bases. I mean, we have, just from the name alone, it's a combination of the game of the word the Metroid and Castlevania, and
you're right. I didn't explain that.
You got so into the technical details of it that it's named for these two franchises. It's Metroid. You have the mechanics of Metroid and the mechanics of Castlevania. Combine them together, and you get. Mwah.
Hey, I mentioned a Metroid game and a Castlevania game. Do I get credit for that?
You'll get partial credit for that. I'll give you that. I will give you that. And Schlifty, welcome. I'm doing well. Long time no see. We are talking Metroidvanias here on Downloadable Content.
Always good to have viewers.
Always good to have viewers. But yes, I think you covered your the bases pretty well. Ron, anything to add?
Not really. Covered it pretty well. I will say that it is a genre that doesn't usually get a lot of outward press, but usually when people see a game, it's one of those games that it's a genre that people don't recognize until they see it.
Mm.
Where it's like, okay, it's an action game, it's an adventure game, it's a platform game, what have you. But like as soon as you generally see like a Metroidvania game, they go, "Oh, okay, this is a Metroidvania game. I know what I'm getting into."
That's a key thing, I think, for Metroidvania, in that it's more of an addition to another genre. Like, it is its own distinct genre, but there's no such thing as a Metroidvania with nothing else. It's a Metroidvania action game. It's a Metroidvania RPG. It's a Metroidvania adventure game.
Yeah.
To describe the mechanics of the game itself, because Metroidvania is more about how the world is built than it is about how you interact with that world.
Yeah, the exploration is kind of the goal.
Exactly.
It's as you've already mentioned, they're non-linear games. This is not your standard like level progression platformer like a Mario or a Sonic. This is, you start off, you could start off in the middle of the map. The overall map is your starting point, and you've got so many branching paths from your starting point.
And that's a key thing, because a lot of people think all Metroidvanias are platformers in some way, and that's not true. I can name several clear Metroidvanias that are not platformers.
Many of them are, but not all of them.
Yes, many of them are. It's definitely the most common genre for Metroidvanias, but it is not the only, obviously not the only genre. There are multiple other ones that play in that space.
Most commonly, you're going to be seeing platforming, then action, like action RPG almost.
Yeah,
almost equal parts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think. Oh, you have. Brian, do you have a photography fact?
I do. This is called. I forgot to disable all of the channel points, because normally we do this on the DLC podcast handle instead of my own.
Do you have photography facts related to video games?
I can see if I can try to pull one out of my ass in the meantime. But no, I
have like a video fact related to video games. I don't know if that's probably mentioned before.
You can do that. I'm going to go in and disable all of these because I forgot to do that.
So generally speaking, games have been rendered with frame rates in mind and how many animations of cells and things like that you have occur within a single second, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how well known of a fact this is, but in the past, it used to be that some game mechanics were tied to frame rate because that was usually perceived to be a fixed thing.
And if you needed to for some games, if you increase the speed on the game, it would literally increase the frame rate because that's the only way to increase the speed of the simulation.
And that ends up being that if certain games, like if you play the original Diablo 2, and you have a quote unquote unlocked frame rate, your character zooms around the map at 500 feet a second because the game movement and several of those damage abilities were tied to how fast were tied to frame rate.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. Then they finally unlinked frame rate from the simulation because they realized limiting.
They realized it was very limiting, and they also realized it was also wildly difficult to balance around. And it still but it still happens today. And when it does happen, is usually not done as a good thing. It's usually done as a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, but if you ever want to look up like old videos of Diablo 2, I believe the game was designed to run at 24 FPS. Try uncapping the frame rate and just seeing how fast your character moves.
There we go. I've done the thing. Thank you for the filler. Back to Metroidvanias.
I was going to say I have a photo fact.
Oh, do you? All right.
Do you know what the first game with a photo mode was?
The first game with a photo mode.
Game Boy camera thing?
Hmm?
Is it a Game Boy camera thing?
So if you count that, that's not what I meant in the game. That would be earlier. You were correct than what I was going to say.
Okay, you meant like a camera in the middle of a game.
Yes, where you can go and take photos in the middle of the game, a camera mode, a photo mode.
It's probably some Nintendo game. Like NES Nintendo.
I don't know if this is actually true. This is what I have been told in the past at the time, that Gran Turismo 4 was the first one to have an actual photo mode.
You know,
there were things. Yes,
it wouldn't surprise me given how pretty the Gran Turismo games are.
Like there were things that had that interacted with an external camera, like the Game Boy camera, but for actually being in the game to let you take pictures of what's going on, that was the first one with an actual photo mode.
And Wikipedia corroborates that. So,
woohoo! My fact was true. That's not often the case on the internet.
But according,
Ron's like, that does not sound right. He is thinking right now.
Don't get me wrong. I could definitely believe it being Gran Turismo doing it first. But this sounds like the thing they would have done like Gran Turismo 3, not Gran Turismo 4.
According to the virtual photography article on Wikipedia, Gran Turismo 4 was the first game to have a built-in photo mode.
Like a photo and photo editing. Okay, I guess photo editing too is...
Yeah.
Okay, if you include photo editing, which is not a thing I was thinking, I was just thinking like taking a picture, like in-game screenshot, basically, or even an in-game...
if we're going with screenshots, we're going all the way back to early computer games, because you could take screenshots of a lot of those.
Yeah.
But these are ones that where you can frame it and change the angles and the lighting.
Change the angle and the lighting and the f-scope and the focus lenses and all that bullshit. Yeah.
Hydrate.
Okay, yeah, Gran Turismo 4. I can see that then.
Yeah, the hydrate one I left open. Yes.
I also have a giant thing of water.
So now that we've established basically what a Metroidvania is, we want to talk about some?
I mean, I suppose we should start off with the classics that named the genre.
I mean, ideally...
Metroid, Castlevania. Though, when we're talking this, they both came out very early on, but early Castlevanias are not actually what we're talking about. The Castlevania side of Metroidvania really started with Symphony of the Night.
That is the Castlevania game that I hear about most often. And if did it come out on PS1? Is that a
Sega Saturn and PS1, I
okay?
believe, were the
And
two.
like Symphony of the Night in particular is frequently held up as as the gold standard of of
Mm,
of Castlevania of the series Castlevania, not of Metroidvanias as a whole.
okay.
But like whenever I see anything about Castlevania, the name that the game in the series that pops up the most is Symphony of the Night. Now, full disclosure, I enjoy Metroidvania games, but I have not beaten a single Metroid or Castlevania game. So
I will say from what you were just going off of, Castlevania, Symphony of the Night is definitely what codified Metroidvania as a genre. On the other hand, I don't think it is the best Metroidvania as a whole, or the best Metroidvania in the Castlevania series. And we can get to that later, but it definitely
opinions.
yeah, but it definitely codified it, brought it to the forefront, and it was definitely the biggest one up to that point.
Yeah. Like to kind of expand upon that, like up to that point,
Like that Super Metroid.
it was basically just Metroid, Samus Returns, and then Super Metroid.
Yes.
Like and Castlevania had similar, like the prior Castlevanias had some of this. It was still mostly a platforming action game where you went from left to right on the screen, and the screen scrolled along as you did. There were occasional branching paths where you could go like, I'm going to go down to the sewers, or I go through the burning town, or things like that. But it wasn't until Symphony of the Night that it actually kind of we got the like the some of the more like important features of the genre added.
And actually, I will correct myself because obviously we had Super Metroid as well, and Super Metroid actually outsold Symphony of the Night by a significant margin. But once again, I feel like Symphony of the Night is more what people think of when they think of the thing that codified Metroidvania, while Super Metroid was kind of like proto of the genre.
Yeah, like the actual proto games are original Metroid, to a lesser extent Samus Returns, and then mainly when people think Metroidvania, they think Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
Well, don't worry, Schlifty, because we have a lot of games that aren't Metroid or Castlevania we will be talking about shortly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Ronnie, basically, you said, and again, corroborated by Wikipedia, that Symphony of the Night basically codified, that really established the genre. Like, that really set it on its merry way.
Yeah, I think part of it's also like, when you have one game, that's an outlier. When you have two games, that's a genre. That's a pattern. A pattern of success in the case of Symphony of the Night and, Super Metroid. On the other hand, it's a pattern that doesn't really continue for a little while. It took a little bit of a break. They had a couple games, like Castlevania did a couple of games on the mobile systems. Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow are two that I think are better than Symphony of the Night. I actually prefer that are in that style. Of course, we got a couple Metroids after this, but for the most part, it wasn't until indie gaming got their hooks in the genre that it really took off and became what it is today.
Yeah, like, and I think one of the earliest ones, in the indie scene. This is one I have played.
One second, I'm gonna take a guess. Is it Cave Story?
It is Cave Story. Congratulations.
Yeah, widely regarded as the first modern indie game.
Yeah, it came out in 2004.
It's Xbox
There were-
Live? The the Xbox Game Arcade thing?
I think it was PC first.
It was Windows first, Japan only, December 2004. It didn't come over to North America until 2010.
Oh, okay.
So it
okay. That's not entirely fair. I believe it was brought over well before that, as a fan translation.
Yeah, I'm talking official
release.
releases.
Yes, I'm just saying it was part of the culture long before that.
Yes, it was. They're saying officially it made it here March 2010 for the Wii and the DS, about a couple of weeks before the Wii release.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, Cave Story has all the hallmarks of a Metroidvania. It is absolutely part of the genre, and it, like I said, I don't necessarily believe it is the first modern indie game, which it gets heralded as on a lot of lists, but it was definitely one of the most influential early indie games, especially in Japan. But its influence was felt over here, and it definitely, I think, started the trend towards Metroidvanias we see in the indie space.
Well, I think part of that too is going back to the kind of the roots of the genre. The Western audience tends to enjoy more sci-fi horror elements, I think, on average at the time.
At the
Whereas
time,
Japan, at the time. Then Japan gets big into horror, usually with modern day horror with like Resident Evil a couple years later, Silent Hill, things like that. But that's all more supernatural modern day compared to like futuristic sci-fi stuff, or in the case of Castlevania, your gothic era like supernatural stuff.
I mean, Metroid started it early on because, like, it wears its influences on its sleeve with relation to the Alien movies and like all kinds of other stuff, and everything that came afterwards, like whether it's every sci-fi Metroidvania that came after that was in a conversation with Metroidvania, whether it was taking that influence and trying to do new stuff with it, or if it was directly trying to do something else. All of it is in comparison to Metroid. They're all well aware of that. Similar to, I don't think you really have a fantasy one that isn't in some way in a conversation with the Castlevania games.
It's hard to do a fantasy Metroidvania because the line between fantasy and supernatural is like almost non-existent.
I will say, but what if they were bugs? Then would fantasy work?
I was gonna say, if you want to go in the direction of Hollow Knight, then it's definitely more like fantasy in that sense, and it makes more sense with Hollow Knight because like this is a bug fantasy world with still supernatural elements to it.
I will actually say a lot of the fantasy-based, not all of them, but a lot of the fantasy-based Metroidvanias all have non- or semi-human protagonists in that kind of world, between Owlboy, Owlboy, Cave Story, not quite.
Ori.
I was going to say Ori, definitely Ori. Yeah, my brain's blanking. I know there's more that I can name, but I didn't go. I made myself a list so I wouldn't forget the things, but I only did like 24 of the most influential ones.
I'll add Ender Lilies to that list as well.
Spoilers. I'm kidding.
Yeah, again, but the point again, the point being is like, is it out there? Yes. However, it's not as common as the sci-fi or supernatural side of things.
I think that I think the fantasy side is about as common. It like I said, it might come out in different ways because like out of the most influential ones I have, about half of them are fantasy and about half of them are sci-fi.
Yeah, that's fantasy sci-fi or fantasy supernatural. Yeah, probably. Again, like the thing with supernatural is people tend to always associate supernatural with like Middle Ages, Renaissance, like that era level of technology where people are walking around in their boots and they're attacking people with swords and things like that, versus even modern day or fantasy specifically, I guess, is when people usually say fantasy, they're usually thinking elves, dwarves,
Well,
dragons, what have you, along with the swords.
When I refer to it, it's fantasy when fantasy has supernatural, that's where you get magic. That's where you get the world has its own pulse and it has living things. And when you talk about sci-fi and that kind of stuff, you have psionics, you have like these space fantasy kind of things. Like you have fantasy supernatural being if it's old style Europe, it's probably, and it has magic, it's probably fantasy. And if it has lots of robots and metal around and weird shit happens, then it's probably sci-fi.
Bird wizard, fantasy. Space bird wizard, sci-fi.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that's it.
There is a difference. The difference there is a one-word difference between the two, but it is decidedly
That's it.
different.
And before somebody says anything, I am well aware that you have science fantasy as compared to science fiction. But that terminology doesn't really hit video games. That's more of when you're talking about fiction. So we're keeping it simple now.
Yes. We can spend 3 hours diving into the weeds here, and let's not.
Yeah.
So
we got a lot of video games to talk about.
We do. I mean, I started with Cave Story as one of the earlier indie ones.
Yes.
Which
have any of the three of us played Cave Story?
I have. I've beaten it.
There we go. I played a little bit of it. I have not beaten it. I do intend to go back to it.
Yep. I mean, I remember it being pretty good. Something that Metroidvanias tend to have with their main characters, a very common theme. It's they take the most of the main characters in the Metroidvanias I've personally played all have amnesia. Every one of them, seemingly.
Wow. Okay, that's not my experience.
I was gonna say,
Wait, you played Ori. Ori doesn't have amnesia.
Like
Ori's just lost.
Ori's a spirit creature. Yes, but like
what Ori has is really shitty developers.
Yes. The heads of Moon Studios are really shitty people, and pisses me off. Why video game industry? Why?
I was looking forward to them doing a third Ori game eventually to make up for my. While I loved both Ori games, I felt both of them were flawed in certain ways. I was really hoping for a third game that could try to become. Look, it's so close to being that perfect Metroidvania, and it's not quite there for me. But I was confident that they could figure it out in the third one, and then it came out that they're a studio that I refuse to support now.
Yeah. Like, I'm I have Ender Lilies on the brain because I just finished that game this afternoon. And so, like, Cave Story starts off with an amnesiac. Just had it on the tip of my tongue. Hollow Knight starts with someone who has forgotten most of themselves.
We'll be talking more about that game.
And, before we started airing, I mentioned, again, because I know Ronnie wants to play Ender Lilies, so I'm not going to dive too heavily into the story for spoilers. But Ender Lilies, great, great game, great Metroidvania. It is the only minor mark I have against it is that if you've played Hollow Knight, a lot of the story is going to feel very similar. But because I enjoyed Hollow Knight, my brain was just like, oh, more Hollow Knight.
I'll say, you don't have to worry about spoiling it for me. I already know. You fight the Hollow Lily at the end, and then you go in and fight the Radiance after you defeat it. That's what happens, right?
As I said, if you've played Hollow Knight, you're going to recognize a lot of the story if you play Ender Lilies. But again, Silksong isn't out yet, so more Hollow Knight-ish.
Hotel Mario, quality Metroidvania. But I mean, going off of what you just said there, like, to me, Hollow Knight is not just one of my favorite games of all time. I feel like, to this point, it's the pinnacle of the genre. I want games to surpass it, but at this point, I think it's the best Metroidvania I've ever played.
Interesting. Now, you and I, Ron, have you played Hollow Knight?
I've played it. I've not beaten it, but I've gotten pretty far into it.
Okay. Before we at the risk of this running away into becoming an all Hollow Knight discussion.
Oh no, in general, for the games we're talking about, I'm trying to stay general when it comes to anything that could be spoilers. So talking about mechanics or the basic premise or things like that are fine. I'm trying not to dive too deep on any of them because, for the most part, almost all the games I'm going to be talking about here, I don't want, like, they're best played.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, in general, if you can, you just said you think Hollow Knight is right now sort of the pinnacle. Now we both we both love Hollow Knight, so I'm curious as to why you think Hollow Knight is you heaping that much praise on it.
I mean, when you really nail it right down to it, I think, like, I could talk about the mechanics, the charm, the different things, but I think what it nailed, which is the most important thing for a Metroidvania, is the exploration. The map is so detailed and interconnected and thoughtful that there's different methods to go through to get to all different areas. There's shit that when I watched somebody speedrun this game, they did shit I didn't know you could do, and I've had every ability in the game.
You've 100%ed the game.
I've 100% of the game. Absolutely, I have. And that was not an easy feat.
Yeah,
that was not an easy feat.
Yeah, I am not a completionist, but of all of the different genres of video games out there, the ones that I want to beat as much as I can are Metroidvanias because I get so hooked by the exploration.
Absolutely, and that's it.
That I want to 100% the game, and I will usually hit like a point where either I've hit like, oh, if you want to like extra stuff, like post-game stuff, like if you wanted to, like after you've beaten the main game, if you want to do like the boss rushes to get to that 100%, that's usually the point where I'll be like, you know what, now I'm good. But
Hollow Knight is one of those games where you think you found everything, and you're 60% of the way through the game. And you keep hitting that point where you think you found everything, and you keep being wrong. And every time is more wonderful things are waiting for you than the last. Until you finally finish the game. And when you finish the game, that's when you get your percent that tells you how far to get through. The only game I completed is Pong. I mean, that's how I was for a long time! I actually had to make a rule that I couldn't buy a video game until I completed a different one to get myself into the habit of completing video games. But back to what I was saying, I don't remember what I was saying.
You were saying at the end. You're saying at the end of your completion of Hollow Knight, you thought you got like 75%
Oh yeah,
of the
yeah.
map.
At the end of the game, that's when you unlock the percentage that shows how much of the game you've completed.
Right.
And that's when you realize how little you've actually seen. Usually, your first time through that game.
I got something to spring off of the exploration aspect, so you guys can finish up your discussion on the exploration.
It's like Hollow Knight gives you that percentage after the fact, whereas a game like Ori will keep a running tally of the percentage you've explored.
I feel like Hollow Knight wants you to organically explore the world until you complete it. And then once you've beaten the game, that's when it gives you that so you can go, oh, if you want to find everything, this is how much more you need to find.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a very deliberate choice.
Yep.
It's deliberate because they don't want you to feel like you have to get all these items to beat the game, because they want you to beat the game with whatever you find along the way. It's a deliberate design choice.
It absolutely is, and it's a good. I think that is a good design choice. You want to know what is another good design choice for Metroidvanias? Put in maps. Every Metroidvania that I've disliked or had issues completing are every single one of them. It might not be their only flaw, but one of their flaws is they don't have a fucking map.
Yeah.
Why I had issues.
Yeah.
It's why I had issues with the original Metroid. Everything looks the same, and you have no map. And yes, you can draw a map, but that is a pain in the ass when you're playing the game. I understand some people love it. I'm a tabletop gamer. I've been playing D&D since I was 8 years old. Yes, really. So I know about drawing maps, but I don't like to have to draw maps while I'm playing video games. And it doesn't help that everything looks the fucking same in the original Metroid.
Yeah, I mean that's a specific aesthetic, but yeah, like it
doesn't help either that not only does everything look the same, but you still can kill everything on screen and still have enemies or hazards show up mid drawing.
Yep.
See, it's hard to do map drawing mid exploration when you still have things coming at you even after you killed everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of Metroidvanias, like Hollow Knight, but it's not the only one at all, have certain enemies that don't respawn until you save the game. So you can go through and go, oh, I've already been here, I killed everything. That, I don't think all of them need to have that, but if you're not going to have a map, have game cues like that make it easier to tell where you come from when where you've been.
Yes, like that is.
Or just have a map.
Oh,
have you thought about having a map?
I don't know. I don't know.
Have either of you played the most recent Metroid?
I have. But I haven't
not
beaten it.
I have not.
Okay. Well, the thing that they added, which is really great, is not just the map or a mini map or what have you, but they allow you to ping and customize the map so you can be like, oh, there's a thing here, or hey, there's a boss door here, or hey, here's a locked door that I don't have a power up for.
I was gonna say, I'm complaining about the first two Metroids for not having it. Metroid has done pretty well with their maps in recent times.
Yeah.
Yes. Like since Prime, roughly, I would say they've been pretty good with the maps.
They introduced the map in Super Metroid, but it was still pretty rudimentary at the time, which is fine. Like, you have to start somewhere. But yeah, like the Metroid Prime games, which aren't Metroidvanias, or at least not traditional ones, but they definitely did the stuff with the maps. And then when you get to stuff like Zero Mission, like, maps perfect. Like, no issues there.
Yeah. And kind of to spring off the back of the map side, a thing that's kind of, in my opinion, is equally integral to a Metroidvania is your movement. How you move in the map, how you interact with the map, how you dodge enemies or go through doors, or just the general animations and movement of your character.
I mean, right alongside with what we mentioned earlier, lock and key design. A lot of the keys in Metroidvania games are are movement options that you unlock as you progress through the game.
It's not even just movement options; it's just how the character sometimes animates and moves, where you feel like you're getting somewhere, even though, like you feel slow and you're not going anywhere in Metroid because of how the maps are designed and how Samus is animated in the original Metroid. Conversely, you then go to Super Metroid, and the addition of a sprint button is nice. Is a nice, it was a simple upgrade. But even then, like just how Samus is animated and how she moves around in the map, and like interacts with things, like you get a larger sense of like, oh, I can explore more, I can move further than I could with the original Metroid or even Samus Returns. And then kind of spring off of that idea, as you get more power-ups and you get more abilities, you start finding out new ways to move or different things where it's like speed booster, jump, double jump, high jump, space jump.
I mean, even when you're getting into stuff like Super Metroid, you have the weirder things like the morph ball. That's a movement option. The sticky ball. That's a movement option. Even stuff like the shine spark.
Bombs. Just like straight up bombs are a movement option too.
Which I mean, yes, they absolutely are. In any other game, it wouldn't be, but in Metroid, bombs are a legitimate movement option.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's kind of a thing you kind of see carry over with the rest of the genre is what movement options do you have available to you that are not just jump, walk, and sprint. Like
because I mean, like mentioning from Hollow Knight, because it has a lot of the basic ones. You got the double jump, you have the wall jump, you have the dash. It has a completely horizontal version of the shine spark. And what am I missing, Brian? I'm missing a movement option in Hollow Knight.
Was there a wall cling?
Well, that's just a wall jump.
That wall jump. Okay.
Yes.
And have a great night, Schlipty. Thank you so much for stopping by. Good to see you.
Glad to have you. I think I'm missing one. I know there's the upgrade to the dash that lets you dash through things, which include attacks and pieces of the terrain.
Does Ori have like a grappling hook or a sticky hand thing?
Ori does. Yes, it does.
Let's see.
Ori also had. Crap.
Like
why am I missing Ori? I only played Ori like 6 months ago. I should remember all this.
Like a gliding option or a like space jump option or
Ori does. Well, I mean, are we talking Ori or Hollow Knight?
I think we're just kind of talking movement options in general. You see,
like Ori gets a feather to glide with, but yes. I'm looking at the. I'm looking at the abilities list for a Hollow Knight. Like you've got the Dream Nail, you've got the Monarch Wings, you get the Shade Cloak.
Yeah.
The Mantis Claw, that was the wall cling and jump off the.
Yep, that's the wall jump.
Yep. The Crystal Heart is the charge.
Yep, that's what I was saying. A horizontal shine spark is what I called it.
Yep. There's an ability which gives him protection from acid in Hollow Knight.
That's the one I'm forgetting.
Isma's Tear. Yep.
Yep, that's what I'm forgetting is protecting yourself from acid, so you can go through all that stuff. Speaking of Ori though, one that I thought was genius in Ori was the bash ability.
Yes.
Which lets you, grab onto a thing and basically aim yourself off of it and throw yourself in that direction.
Yeah, it freezes time for a couple of seconds where you can do that and propel yourself forward. Yep.
I don't know if that's the first game that showed up, because I have not played a Metroidvania that has that ability, and I hope that gets taken into other things, because that was such a genius mechanic that created some really fun new puzzles and new ways of thinking about a level different than you would get in a normal Metroidvania. And that's one of the best things about playing different Metroidvanias is, so there's these skills that most Metroidvanias have. They have double jump, they'll have a dash, they'll have a wall jump, but then they'll have a couple that are unique to that specific game, and that's what makes you have to think about the exploration differently.
Yep.
And that, I think, is the best thing in a Metroidvania, is when it has to make you think different.
Like, there was one that I had forgotten about because I played it quite a while ago, called Sundered.
Yes.
Which uses the mechanics of either absorbing the evil spirits or rejecting them, and how that affects the play of the game, because it affects the abilities as well. Because, by absorbing these evil powers, you gain various movement abilities. Whereas if you choose to remain pure, you're making it a little harder on yourself. But there are also specific abilities that you unlock by staying pure as well. So it kind of balances out. But it's like
another game that has kind of a similar thing of how it changes the gameplay throughout it is, this one's not even out yet, is Gigasword, which is a Kickstarter I backed, which is a Metroidvania game, where you get this giant sword as a human. The sword belonged to this giant thing that died, so it was a regular sword to them. For you, you can barely walk around with it, but you can kill shit, or you can take the sword, stab it into the ground, and leave it there, and now you're mobile. So you have two completely different play styles, and the game forces you to go back and forth between, okay, you have a weapon, you can fight things, but you can't, you're not as agile, you can't do a lot of stuff, or you have to put it down, but now you have no weapon, and you have to be able to go through and platform through these things without a way to fight.
It's an interesting mechanic. It's like, well, how do you adapt with that? And that's interesting.
Yeah, when it comes out, you will hear me talking to you about it, Brian.
I'm sure you will.
I think it's a game you'll enjoy. Hopefully, it's a good one.
Oh yes, that is the risk with Kickstarter.
Yeah, but I think I've only been burned once by a video game Kickstarter.
All right.
Part of that is because I'm very selective.
Yes.
But basically everyone that I've been part of has been a big success. Hashtag Shovel Knight and Hollow Knight. Undertale, though, I didn't participate in the back Kickstarter for Undertale. I wish I had. I didn't know about it at the time.
So another Metroidvania that I've played recently, you were talking about games that are Metroidvanias but deviate a little bit from the standard. I'm gonna bring up Dead Cells, which is
Dead Cells. I'll say Dead Cells, roguelike, but also Metroidvania.
Yes, because unlike a standard Metroidvania where it's just one big exploration, like Dead Cells is a roguelike, which means when you die, you start back at the beginning.
Now, I own Dead Cells. I haven't gotten around to playing it. It was actually one of my Christmas presents this year. I asked from my mother-in-law. But, so, is Dead Cells a roguelike or roguelite? Does it have any progression character progression that persists across different ones? Or is, okay,
yes,
so it is roguelite.
Yeah. You will. There is some like permanent item progression or permanent weapon progression.
Yep.
Or permanent stat progression. So
I am on board with roguelites, but I am not a fan of losing everything every time I die. I don't like traditional roguelikes.
Now, this is a
One letter difference makes a big difference.
Yeah, this is Dead Cells is a rogue light, and
Good.
it's very much also. I mean, it's considered a Metroidvania because in your path to the end, there's a lot of ways you can go. It's never the same. It's never the same 2 runs running because levels in that game, like Sundered, and this is where some of the indie devs have taken the genre and have made it their own, randomly generated rooms.
Yeah. And that's straight out of Rogue.
Yeah, and Sundered does this, Dead Cells does this, where it's like, yeah, you get to a specific area of the map and it looks generally familiar, but the layout is different. So it's always keeping you guessing in that regard. Which, depending on how you typically like to play your games, that could either be frustrating or a welcome change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would be remiss not to mention the 2 spiritual successor games to the Metroid and Castlevanias, where we have Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, the return to form from Kogi Igarashi, but then the indie game that is kind of a spiritual successor for Metroid, obviously not by the same creator, but definitely in feel, Axiom Verge.
Yes.
Yeah, Axiom Verge definitely leans more into like the sci-fi horror stuff a lot more than the original Metroids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I haven't beaten Axiom Verge. I got to play it at PAX a few years ago when it was new and shiny, and the developer was just like, "Please play this game."
I feel like Axiom Verge is the kind of horror they wanted to do with the original Metroid and didn't have the capabilities at the time.
Yeah, they didn't have the freaking memory capacity to
Now,
have blood red walls and
but
body parts all over the place.
Later Metroids definitely don't lean into the horror as much, but just hearing them talk about what they wanted to do with the original Metroid, I feel like Axiom Verge is very much what they were trying to do, and just they couldn't.
Yeah, for those unaware, the original Metroid was meant to be a lot more like aliens, like
Oh yeah, that was its direct inspiration.
What's the art? Yeah, but what's the artist's name? I'm forgetting the.
Oh, you're talking about
Geiger.
Yes, H.R. Geiger.
H.R. Geiger, like it was meant to be a very much H.R. Geiger inspired, like world setting, and you're playing a space marine that's just like trying to like fight their way out off the planet, basically.
Yeah, and they not that they entirely lost it, but they definitely didn't lean as heavily into the horror as they progressed. But I like I said, I think Axiom Verge very much captures what they were trying to do in the first Metroid.
Yeah, like the later Metroids is definitely leans more into the sci-fi, like exotic locations and
sci-fi action rather than
sci-fi horror. It does have some more horror elements in Dread, although that's more so the concept of horror in the sense of like a Terminator horror, I guess the best way to describe it. This thing is not gonna stop chasing you as long as you're within your box.
Yeah, the Determinator. It will just keep tracking you down no matter what you do. It might go slow, but it's always there, right behind you when you least expect it.
Yeah, as long as you're within the patrol zone, basically.
So just like the concept of SAX and Fusion, they just at that point they just didn't have it down as well as they get later in Dread.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But do you have something to say about Axiom Dread, Brian? Before we move on to
no,
Bloodstained?
No, it's just like when I demoed Axiom Verge, and I'm looking at when it came out. It was 2015, and I was just like, oh my god, I remember demoing this game
Feeling old?
before it came out and just the evidence of how much this developer, Thomas Happ, who not only he developed it, he published it, he composed it.
I'll say it was like him and like 2 other people basically did like 95% of the work, right? Or was it literally just all him?
Let me
I thought it was him and like a couple other people did some QAing for it, and that was it.
He is the sole developer, artist, and musician of the game, and he began to work on it in 2010 as a side project. So yeah, it was just him.
Okay.
It was just him, and just when I demoed this game, like the love letter to Metroid was so there and so obvious and so pure, and you know, as Ronny said, like now you have developers who are making these games that look and they have the look and the feel of NES games, but are way above and beyond the capabilities of the NES, but still retaining that feel.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I know they're not Metroidvanias, but Shovel Knight and Mina the Hollower, both from Yacht Club Games. I mean, holy shit, those are right out of the NES. And if they were on the NES, they would be some of the best games on the system. But, like, just showing a natural progression for what if we kept doing these kinds of games as hardware continue getting better? Like, what if we had an extra couple years of NES that didn't actually happen? Like, that's what it feels like.
1985 technology versus 2015 technology.
Yeah, exactly. But still taking the style and the game development ethos of that era and just taking it a little farther.
Yeah.
So, but Axiom Verge is not the only one we had to talk about here for spiritual successors. We also have Bloodstained, proving that we want more Castlevania, Konami. Stop making pachinko machines.
I was waiting for the Konami pot shot.
I was gonna say, don't worry, they're coming. But like the problem I have with Bloodstained is a thing I brought up earlier. The movement in the game feels a little clunky. And I feel like the movement in Bloodstained is not as smooth as it could be because of the game engine they chose to make the game in.
I thought that was an Unreal. That they used Unreal Engine for that.
I don't think it was Unreal. I thought it was Unity.
Let's pull up. Let's go to Lord Wikipedia. Bloodstained.
Well, I mean, once again, like
Knight.
Hollow Knight is Unity.
Yeah, but
So
like,
it's not like you can't make a good one.
Yeah, but
Unreal Engine 4.
Their thing was like some weird 3D modeling for Bloodstained, though. They did some like weird 3D modeling versus like a deliberately 2D art style.
Yeah, and it took me a while to get you. Like, let's put it this way: I played it. I personally didn't have any issues with the movement, but I'm not saying that couldn't be. It's been a while since I played it. I don't recall that, but I will say I definitely was put off by the 3D aesthetic at first. It grew on me over the course of the game. It's just not what I expect out of a Metroidvania.
Yeah, the art style was definitely a choice. I don't necessarily think it was bad or good. I think it was meh, personally. I think they went with 3D modeling on the guys that would be easier to animate and rig and do like backdrops and scenery and things like that.
Confirming it was Unreal Engine 4.
Okay, it was Unreal Engine 4. Okay, thank you. The problem, though, is, as we have seen, okay, you can have a 3D model and animate and rig it all you want. Now you gotta lock it on a 2D plane and have the camera lock on a 2D plane and have it move and operate and run on a 2D plane. That's a pretty hard thing to do, and like to kind of like give credit where credit is due. Like, we've seen this done before in the past with 3D engines in different genres. The biggest one I can think of is Guilty Gear Xrd and Guilty Gear Strive, where it is Unreal Engine
Yeah, I was going to say Mortal Kombat 10 and 11 as well.
Mortal Kombat 9, 10, and 11 also do it too. But what those games go for the Mortal Kombat series, which is more of a hyper realism sort of like model where it makes sense to have that, you have a deliberately like an anime style, which like this looks like this should be a 2D animated game, but they are 3D models. Like everything in that game is a 3D model. It's just locked on a 2D plane.
Arc System Works is a master of doing that.
And Arc System Works has spent like the Team Red, the team that did the development work on Guilty Gear XR series and Guilty Gear Strive, did a lot of work on the rigging and the animation to make those characters play like a 2D sprite.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I definitely could see them improving a lot of that stuff in Bloodstained, but mechanically, like I love the concept of getting the souls and imbuing them. I didn't end up having an issue with the movement. I really enjoyed it. It was not the perfect game for me, but like it was a very solid Metroidvania, and I definitely am interested in seeing what that team does going forward.
I think the biggest thing that team needs is basically just more experience and a bigger budget. Like this was a Kickstarter backed game from the creator of like the Castlevania series, who left Konami after Konami decided that they're not making video games anymore. And they said, "Fuck you, we're gonna make money off of Japan's pachinko machines."
What are you talking about? They still make Metal Gear Solid games occasionally.
Yeah, they hit the Metal Gear Solid slot machine when they're running low on the pachinko money. but I digress. The creator is still there. He still has that. He still has the directing chops. I just think they need to get some more, like, basic experience with whatever engine they want to use.
I was very happy when Bloodstained came out the way it did, because after Kenji Inafune and Mighty Number 9, like we needed a success.
Yeah, it's like, again, this is just my experience. I felt like the movement in the game was a little clunky compared to some of the more smoother movement options you had, even with like Hollow Knight, Axiom Verge, and whatnot.
Have you played Symphony of the Night? How did you feel about that? Because I feel like it was pretty similar to Symphony of the Night's movement. I'm wondering if it's just that style.
The difference in movements between Symphony of the Night and Bloodstained, like those two specifically, is with Bloodstained, it is a deliberate 2D art style, a deliberate 2D choice. You're talking about 2D sprites.
Yeah.
So you have limited frame rates, or you have specific animation you have to go through doing the movement of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
With Bloodstained, because it's a 3D model rigging, and it's not trying to mask the fact that it's a 3D model, you have these what can appear to be weird or jerky movements when you are jumping around on the stage.
Okay.
Now they may have gone back and polished this up since I stopped playing. I believe I beat Bloodstained like within a week after it first came out.
I'll say I played the worst version of Bloodstained. I played it on the Switch.
Ooh, I
right
played
after
PC.
it came out. So
yeah, I
before
played
any
PC.
patches.
Yeah, I played PC, so I had okay time with it. Again, it's possible they may have polished some of this stuff since then. I cannot confirm or deny. I know the game did get some balance patches and some bug fixes and things like that.
And new characters.
And new characters, because they got back to the point where they had added some DLC characters. They added
Zangetsu,
and then
they added the
Wizard, I think.
Yes, but that's not who I was thinking of. They just added a character from a different game, a game that I've played, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the character. So 1 second while I'm Googling it, you guys can keep talking.
I was actually fine with the main character, the not Shanna, or Shanoa, the girl that's like got demon blood in her, and she's got the glass rose tattoo or whatever. Like I was actually fine with her as a character.
Miriam.
Miriam, yeah. I'll
Yeah.
side with Miriam. She plays the amnesiac character pretty well, and then the general design of that character I was okay with too. Like the design of the characters they have in the game are fine. I don't think they're bad or good. I think they fit with that art style in general, that theme of what they're going for. I just didn't. So something about the movement in that game just felt a little off to me, especially early on. I think
There we go. Aurora, the main
Aurora.
character of Child of Light,
Okay.
just got added beginning of this month.
Okay.
That's what I
Yeah.
couldn't remember.
Yeah, I think the movement improved as you got more power ups, but I just remember like the very beginning, like the first couple hours, just the movement feeling very stiff.
Okay. Well, once again, without going, I like not dismissing your concern. When I go back through, I'll see how I feel. I didn't recall that when I played, but it's been quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, I played Ritual of the Night, and the thing that threw me off the most was David Hayter, because he's the voice of Zangetsu, and when you encounter him, I'm like, Solid Snake, why are you in this game?
He can play other characters.
Well, he can. I would but David Hayter has such a recognizable voice, and he only uses one voice.
He is definitely a person that is hired for a specific character, personality,
like
for lack of a better term.
I feel like he fits Zangetsu very well.
Because Zangetsu is the lone wolf character who's forced into dealing with other people because he has to. Just like Solid Snake, just like half the other people David Hayter ends up voicing.
Yeah, I'm just that's just a side comment. Like, I encountered him and I was just like record scratch. Like, oh, hi there.
What did you think of Bloodstained?
It's like he's like H. John Benjamin, only uses one voice. And no, I did enjoy Bloodstained Ritual Light. It felt it just because of the gothic horror aspect, it made me think of Devil May Cry in places. Like the original.
I definitely got that.
Yeah, there's definitely some inspiration of Devil May Cry in there, which I don't think it's a bad thing. I think
no, that's not a bad thing at all. I like some of the mechanics. I love some of the side stuff. This game has a crafting mechanic.
Yes, it does.
Which, again, I don't usually see in a whole lot of Metroidvanias.
Honestly, I think, well, I didn't feel this way when I first started it. I think the 3D aesthetic actually is a benefit to set it apart from Castlevania as a whole and give itself its own identity.
I agree. I think the 3D aesthetic can benefit it, and we've seen how a 3D modeled game can be used in Metroidvania style and how it can be done well because of the success of Metroid Dread. Just a random aside here. The last Metroid game was freaking Federation Force. Do you want the finale game?
No, it wasn't. That wasn't a Metroid game. Keep that name out of your mouth.
That's my point. That's my point. Is that the last game with the Metroid name in it was Federation Force back in like 2013 or some crap like that. And even before that, if you want to go back to the last Metroid game proper, you're going back to, is it Metroid Pinball or straight up Metroid Corruption?
Corruption, probably.
Yeah, it's probably Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Back on the Wii, back in freaking 2005 or 6.
Well, one second. One second.
While you're looking that up.
I think there was one after that, but I'm going to double check.
While you're looking that up, Ron, do you have a light we can shine on your face? We're losing you. You have a lit back. Oh, yeah. You're becoming Shadow Ron here.
I can see. Hang on. Give me 1 minute here. I can try and fill with my lights here. Give me 1 moment.
But yes.
I was going to say, I knew there was one after that. So first of all, before Dread, we had Samus Returns. That was only a couple years.
Wasn't that Metroid 2?
That's the remake of Metroid 2. Before that, we had Other M.
Ah, okay.
That came out after Corruption.
Ah, all right. That's okay. I see now. Hey, there's Ron's face.
That's about as good as I can do. Sorry.
That's all right. No, I can see you now. But just
I think a ball's about to go. That's why
but no.
I think I see it reflecting in the camera. So if I suddenly go dark again, it's because the ball went out.
High production values this podcast.
So, but
what'd your research tell you?
Well, my research told me there were 2 games since then. You had Samus Returns, which came in 2017,
which was a remake remastering of Samus Returns,
and then you have Other M in 2010.
Oh fucking god! Yeah, sorry. Do you want your last games and your freaking games genre to be Other M? Which is okay.
Samus Returns was not bad.
Okay, Samus Returns wasn't bad. Little linear, but not bad. And honestly, for Other M, the gameplay of Other M was fine.
Yeah, it was actually that people took issue with.
It was the story and the characterization people took issue with, and I am one of those people. Because so just minor ranting here. I can understand why Samus agreed to be limit her power level with regards to the station they were on, because let's face it, Samus at full power is a walking weapon of mass destruction. Like power bombs, vital cells are basically miniature thermonuclear devices. And Adam, being a military general who knows the full capabilities of the Samus suit.
She's working under the military at that point. That is not a stretch for me.
Well, she's not working in the military at that exact moment. She shows up because she got a distress signal from the station. And being a bounty hunter, she's like, oh, somebody's in trouble. I can make money off of this. Did not realize the station was a military station until she shows up and Adam and the military people are there. At that point, Adam pulls rank and she just goes along with Adam because of the respect she has for him as a person.
That's what I meant. She could either walk away, or if she's going to help the military people, she has to follow the guidelines. To me, she's under the military at that point.
Yeah, but that is a deliberate choice she made, and I'm actually okay with that. My problem is you see Ridley for the first time in Metroid Other M, I don't know, 30 minutes into the game roughly or so, maybe an hour at most, and she freezes up and just stops and has a panic attack. I'm like, lady, you've killed him 4 times now. I understand childhood trauma is a trauma, but you've shot it multiple times with missiles and bombs and powerful lasers. And you've seen the thing die multiple times. Just because he gets cloned and gets brought back to life isn't your fault. And in my opinion, nothing solves trauma like shooting it in the face until it's dead.
I mean, here's the thing. Other M takes place between Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, so it's not the most current one. So she's only killed him twice at that point.
If you take Metroid Zero Mission as canon, she has killed him twice.
Okay.
3 times. With Okay, hang on. Actually,
I'll accept that.
Okay, no question. Okay, question here. Are we considering Metroid Prime canon? Prime series canon?
I keep forgetting about the Prime series taking place before. Yeah, it's canon. It is canon.
If you assume Metroid Prime
then
series
she's
is
killed
canon,
him all.
She's killed him twice in Zero Mission, again in Prime 2, again in Prime Corruption, again in Super Metroid. That's 6 times before we even get to Other M.
And at that point, it's not a fear anymore. It's a job.
Yeah, at that point, you're pest control.
Yeah.
At that point, you're pest control, and you're getting called in to deal with the flying lizard problem.
He's, I was gonna say, he's fucking William Afton. He always comes back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, okay, so also keep in mind too. Okay, other M. Oh, sorry, other M was this. No, this one was Super Metroid. This is other M. This is Fusion. Does Ridley show up in Dread? I want to say yes. I swear I want to say yes because I just assume so. You're like, is it bad for me to assume he shows up in Dread?
The only one, as far as I know, the only ones he didn't show up in was Metroid 2 and its remake.
Yeah, and the only reason why he doesn't show up... No, wait, he shows up in the remake! He shows up in the remake, too! Yes. When you go to leave the planet with the baby, like, Mecha Ridley shows up again suddenly for some dumb reason, and you have to laser him. Like, okay, that's 10 times. Come on, we're at 10 times now, assuming Samus Returns remake is canon.
When people hear Metroid, they think of Mother Brain when you think of villains, but I was gonna say, Ridley is way more.
Yes,
way more games than Mother Brain.
Yeah, Mother Brain's literally in Zero Mission, Super Metroid.
Yeah,
that's it.
The original,
like, literally. Yeah, Zero Mission is original plus some extra bonus.
Oh, okay. The Zero Mission's a remake of the original.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a remake of the original game basically.
And it has story in it, so when people talk about the canon of the games, they just talk about Zero Mission because the original Metroid doesn't really add anything.
Yeah, the original Metroid doesn't even reveal the fact that Samus is a girl until you beat the game in under 2 hours or 3 hours or something like that.
So we talked about 3D games a couple times in this. I'm gonna go off on a little tangent.
Oh, let's.
I am going to make the entirely justifiable assertion that how convoluted is Metroid?
We don't have the time. We don't have the time, Ryan.
Okay. Here, the simplest answer is Space Bird Wizards augment human DNA to create a super warrior, and they give her a weapon of mass destruction to police the galaxy with.
They watched too much early 90s movies, and they wanted to create a Terminator. So they created one and named it Samus.
Although I'm willing to believe that the whole story of Metroid is still easier to understand than Kingdom Hearts. But moving on, Ronny, you want
It is.
So I'm going to make the assertion that the entire Souls-like genre are just 3D Metroidvanias. They have a focus on exploration, which is non-linear, where you unlock shortcuts between areas that allows you easier access to move across the things. The only thing that it doesn't have are abilities you unlock, but it still uses lock and key gameplay. It's literal lock and key where you have to get to the other side to unlock things.
I will say, for the prior Souls games before Elden Ring, they are not Metroidvanias.
Okay.
For the simple reason that for the simple fact that you, generally speaking, don't have enough tools to dodge or evade enemies. There are some cases and some situations where the game just forces you to do the run back of death, to go back and reclaim your souls, and go and fight enemies along the way to even get back to where you were.
But Hollow Knight has that, and we all agree Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania, and it has the exact mechanic of dropping all of your, in this case, money, and you have to work your way back to that point with all the enemies respawn.
The difference being for Hollow Knight is Hollow Knight allows for movement to allow to dodge a large portion of those things. With the Dark Souls series, there were certain situations where you couldn't dodge, or if you got an errant hit on you because the hitboxes in that game and in those games were wonky, and are still wonky, mind you.
I mean,
But
Yeah,
so
go
that
ahead.
let me finish my
Yeah, go
reasoning
ahead.
here.
You finish.
Let me finish. So those games aren't because the lack of movement options are not. There's not enough movement options available to you. For Elden Ring specifically, I actually am okay with calling it a Metroidvania because you have the goddamn horse. Because the horse provides such a large degree of movement and speed that you can just run past a large portion of the open world. And then when you get to the quote unquote dedicated like legacy dungeons, which are your old style Dark Souls games, even then you still have the other quality of life improvement of the Marika statues, which by and large which are usually placed solely to prevent the 10-minute run back that would lead to an errand in a lot of those cases.
I would argue that what you're saying isn't a defining part of Metroidvanias, it's the defining part of the other genre that it's in. So I'm going to use Hollow Knight as an example. Other than the abilities acting as lock and keys, the fact that you have all these movement options to get through enemies, that's about it being a platformer. That's like the only point to this is that Metroidvanias use lock and key design to keep you from getting to places, to keep you from getting everywhere at once. Those locks and keys can be anything. It doesn't have to be movement abilities. I don't see movement abilities as inherent to Metroidvanias. It's just a very convenient way to do the lock and key design that Metroidvanias need.
Yeah, I mean, Metroidvanias use both movement and weapon or spell or
it's lock and key design regardless, whether it's movement or to weapons or to whatnot. It's just the lock and key design that's the important.
Yeah, and I kind of feel that with Dark Souls, like while a defining mechanic of a Metroidvania is just gating areas of the world behind items or skills, Dark Souls doesn't. Dark Souls takes a bit of a more passive approach where the gating is through enemies.
I mean, it gates through enemies, but it also gates, such as I said, when you finish an area, oftentimes you will find doors that you can unlock that give you shortcuts to previous areas where you had to work through stuff. That's still gated locking of the areas.
Yeah, but a lot of the time the gating of that shortcut is because they want you to. They basically force you to go through and fight through those enemies because they want
absolutely.
you to level up to try and have a better chance of fighting the boss of that zone.
So we're focusing on the difference here, and it's fine that. But I will say, do you disagree with my assessment of it's a large non-linear game with a major focus on exploration as the key thing? Those are some of the key components of Metroidvania.
I say it's not for Elden Ring. I think you're okay with making that claim because of the design of the game being a decidedly open world exploration focused thing.
Mm-hmm.
For the other Dark Souls games, I don't think you can make that similar claim because if you get stuck in a certain area in Dark Souls, you're kind of just forced to bash your head up against the wall until the wall eventually breaks. There's very few options for you to backtrack or go around the wall that you're at.
So you have points in the original Dark Souls. I will agree is the least of this. It is the most. Souls fans can tell me if I'm wrong. I've watched through the whole playthroughs of them. From my understanding, the first one is the most linear.
Yes, Dark Souls 1 is the most linear.
Now,
Dark Souls 2 and 3 open up some of that.
Yeah, it still does have non-linear segments where you have to get the souls and you can choose which of the four directions. But yes, it is the least. But Dark Souls 2 and 3 have you have a point where you have to get up to, but then it opens up where you can choose different paths on where you want to go.
So the reason why, so as someone that has played and beaten all 3 Dark Souls games and then gotten a fair bit through Elden Ring, the reason why I'm saying that is because you basically just get a hub town on all the Dark Souls games.
Yeah.
You get a hub town that you can call your home base or what have you, and then you go out and explore the world of one of three paths. And usually those 3 paths are either difficult, suicidal, or the intended route. And usually, more often than not, you go with the intended route or the difficult one.
Mm.
People that are crazier speedrun usually do the suicidal route, but that's usually what ends up happening. Either way, though, you still have to do all three of those things eventually.
Eventually, but I mean, same thing with many Metroidvanias, where you're choosing which directions you want to go and which route you want to take through them. But like Hollow Knight, you still have to get all three Dreamers before you can finish the game.
Yeah.
You can choose which ones you want to go to first, but you still have to get through all of them. Most Metroidvanias have some kind of progression locked by bosses like that. Like I said, I can see arguments for why they're not. I'm just arguing on the similarities of these two genres that are a lot more than people think, and that I think a 3D Metroidvania looks like Dark Souls. Like, that is the closest we have to a 3D Metroidvania mostly.
Wasn't there a 3D Castlevania on N64?
Yeah, and it was terrible. It was also fully linear.
What about
I've never played it, but what about Darksiders?
I haven't played Darksiders, and that is there are a couple games that I would list here. One of them being the Metroid Prime games. But I would argue they have flaws in them being Metroidvanias as well.
Technical note, Ronny, you're out of focus.
I know, and I have no idea how to fix it.
Oh, okay. Just
my alarm went off to take my meds, and I had to take the phone down to remove that alarm so it wouldn't disrupt the podcast. And since I did that, this is what I look like now.
All right, so you look.
Can I have a focus or get gunk on it, maybe?
No, I tried cleaning off. It's not gunk on it. It is the focus from me taking it down, but I don't know how to fix it.
I
don't know how to mess with it other than completely disconnecting it from this, and then I won't be on the podcast.
All right.
I can turn the video off if it's distracting.
No, it's not. No, it's just I just looked over and I'm like, oh, you're slightly fuzzy.
Yeah. On the topic of Darksiders, I played a little bit of it, not enough to be a definitive expert or anything on it. I think you could. I think it's more appropriate to call Darksiders more like God of War-esque, if that makes sense. Where you have these wide open areas to explore and go through, but there's no multiple options. You have to go into a specific area. You can't really backtrack or explore other routes.
And I also see, in doing some prep for this episode, I also saw that Batman Arkham Asylum gets thrown around as a possible 3D Metroidvania.
Again, not really, because you're kind of confined to specific areas where they want you to go. Arkham City might make more sense because that's a bit more of an open world route. Like, you have multiple ways to go through that game.
Boy, I made it worse.
So I think I would personally say the Metroid Prime series is still a Metroidvania, because even though there is still like a more linear progression in those games, you still have like options available to you of a couple routes to go, or a couple bosses you can beat to try and get around stuff.
Because I've like when you think about 3D, if you're trying to think of 3D games that would fit the Metroidvania thing, you could also make an argument for the classic Resident Evil games.
They definitely are lock and key, and you definitely have many of. I think all of them have at least non-linear portions, even if it's not the entire game.
Yeah, like it has a nice mix. I mean, it's obviously it's not classified as a Metroidvania. It's survival horror action.
Hey, look, Is this better?
You're in focus. Hey, how about that?
I'm pretty sure I'm in focus right now.
You are with one eye. There you go.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to deal with it being like this right now. I can't fix it.
All right, no worries.
Just everybody, your prescriptions are off. You're gonna need to go get your eyes checked.
But yeah, I mean, there's like for a true 3D Metroidvania, like I can't really think of any solid examples off the top of my head.
I missed what you said.
Yeah, Ron, you are muted.
Shadow of the Colossus? Did you hear that now?
Yes, that I heard. Shadow of the Colossus.
Okay. Like that's the only thing that I can think of that might be a more true to style Metroidvania.
I would not disagree at all. Shadow of the Colossus, I think, fits.
So that's
Yeah,
that's all I've got on the 3D front.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why you don't see or hear too many 3D games in that style is because with the introduction of the third dimension, in terms of movement, that suddenly leads to it quickly jumps from Metroidvania to open world.
Mm-hmm.
Because the introduction of the Z-axis, for lack of a better term, means that you basically just have more areas to move around in. Also, by and large, because Metroidvania games have a degree of jumping involved in a lot of them, or vertical movement involved, jumping on Z-axis then means you're sometimes bypassing intended blockades, or in some cases, like jumping around like large swaths of the map and not even going to certain areas.
Yes.
Like on a programming front, I could see where and on a development front, I could see where that could get tricky.
Yeah, and like sure, there's going to be like lock and key things along the way that may block you off because of the simplest answer would be because of rendering limitations. That to render that particular area, they need to have it be a lock and key to basically load you off the map and then load you into a new box.
I would say that Metroidvanias and open world games both fulfill the same desire in gaming of exploration, just in different ways.
Yeah.
So they are, if they may not be exactly the same, but they are at least brother and sister. They're at least sibling genres because they both are trying to fulfill the same thing, just in slightly different ways because of the limitations of 2D or 3D.
Metroidvanias have you explore from smaller box to bigger box to bigger box to bigger box along the way, and then back and forth between the two. Open worlds, generally speaking, go from gigantic box into nesting doll, smaller.
Yes, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So basically, they're doing the same thing, just in reverse.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. Do we want to move on from 3D, Brian?
I mean, I'm good with that.
So I have one I wanted to bring up. So we mentioned that while there are other genres, we mentioned Dead Cells, that most Metroidvanias are platformers. So I wanted to bring up another example of a Metroidvania that is not a platformer. Very much because you don't actually stand on anything, and that game is Carrion. Have either of you two heard of Carrion?
I have not.
It's on my wish list. I want to play it.
So I finished Carrion very recently, last month and a half ago. So Metroid took off of the Alien franchise. Carrion wanted to take off of a very different horror movie, and Carrion is literally John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
You play as the Thing, basically, escaping from an Arctic base, and that's the premise. You were held in, there's an accident, you break free, and you have to find a way to escape, and you can assimilate other animals and DNA to gain other abilities. And that's how you get the abilities in the game.
I remember seeing this. This is like basically you're basically like a giant slime creature. And you got sticky your way across the walls and eat people along the way to get past doors.
And you basically float.
Yeah.
Because your tentacles grab onto things, and that's how you move around.
Yeah.
But
and then the goal of the game is basically to get out and cause you on the world because you're a space horror.
Exactly. I have a lot of positive things to say about the game, so I'll start off with my negatives. It does not have a map. That was a huge issue because it, much like Metroid, has very similar looking areas that some of them look almost identical, and it makes it very difficult to grok exactly where you are when you're playing the game. The other issue, which becomes less important later on, is the mechanic where your most basic attack is you have a tentacle that you can go out, grab something, and then bring it in to eat, or just fling it around to hit things and break it. It's very awkward to control. You're aiming it with the right stick, but it's not just aiming. How far it goes out is also how far you move the stick, so you kind of have to gauge how far you think the thing is away from you, or you'll overshoot it. And that's irritating. But every ability you get afterwards kind of replaces that, where you don't really need to use that ability anymore, so that is a much smaller concern. But outside of that, like, the game looks great, sounds great, it has a freaking amazing premise, and I really hope they do a Carrion 2, because I think with a little bit more polish, they really have something there.
Like, I do want to play this game. Like, I've seen it, and like, I think one of the criticisms was that it was a short game, but that's a whole different argument.
Some games are better short.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not
getting... I had to make that argument on Facebook the other day that, you want to know what? I would rather have a really, really tight 10-hour game than a 20-hour game or a 30-hour game that drags.
Absolutely.
Generally speaking, a polished game or a well-written and well-structured game will always feel better than a looser story game, in my opinion.
And I mean, there are games that are 30 or 40 hours that still, like, the pacing is great and they still feel tight. But with a lot of games, you can tell where it's okay. We needed to pad this out. I guess it's some games overstay their welcome, and the whole point of game development is to find out and finish the game before you hit that point.
Yeah, like Ori, like the original Ori and the Blind Forest, which is, a 6 to 8 hour game, but it's a solid. It is solid and polished from start to finish.
Here's the example, and this is the example I used when I was arguing with the guy about this. Chrono Trigger is widely regarded as one of the best RPGs of all time. It is not a long game. Especially for that genre. Like, you can finish Chrono Trigger in 10 hours. You can finish Chrono Trigger faster than that if you know what you're doing.
Yes. Yes, you could. Let's see. Winged 41 is asking, how about the Prince of Persia game that came out on Game Boy Advance back in the day? I have no idea what game he's talking about, so...
I know the game he's talking about. I have not played it yet. It is one of those games that I had recommended me years ago. I have a ROM of it sitting on my computer, and I just have not gotten around to playing it yet.
So there you go. That is your answer there.
Yeah,
Waiting
yeah, I
for-
haven't
The,
played
the
it, so
answer
I
is,
can't.
if you want to talk about the Prince of Persia game, you need to jump on this podcast.
This is
Yeah,
that is the answer. So something that Metroidvania games also have in common, at least particularly in the ones that I have played, are the sidekick characters. Like Ori has one with the forest spirit. I forget its name. Begins with an S. Then there's another. Then Ender Lilies. You have a whole host of them. There's another one that I played years ago called Dust and Elysian Tale.
Yep,
Which
that was on my list.
Which has the sentient sword.
You don't have one in Hollow Knight unless you count Zote.
No, you don't have one in Hollow Knight. I do not count Zote.
Castlevania Symphony of the Night doesn't-ish. So in Symphony of the Night, you can unlock familiars, and you can have them like accompany you by turning them on or off. But they have no, like, they're not like story characters. So I don't think that counts, or at least I wouldn't count that.
Well, it's interesting. Like in the case, for the Metroidvanias in which your character has no memory of what happens, you need something to tell the audience the story.
You mean like Hollow Knight?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I'm just saying, you're using it as the thing, and I'm like, well, Hollow Knight has a character that's amnesiac. You brought that up earlier.
Yes.
But it does not have that. But then again, Hollow Knight kind of revels in you not knowing what the fuck is going on.
And also, Hollow Knight has you find NPCs which flesh out the world.
Yeah.
Which is not something you find in other Metroidvanias. Some.
I was about to say, one thing I actually think... Now, this is not universal. There are a lot of Metroidvanias we can name that don't have this, but one thing that I think Metroidvanias, especially early ones, had was they were more story-focused than most 2D games, especially 2D platformers.
Yeah, I mean, journey and narrative go hand in hand with a Metroidvania.
Yeah, it's about exploration, but it's not just about the mechanics of exploration, of how you get from here to here. It's exploration of a living world, or, in the case of several of them, a dead world.
A dead world, yeah.
But it's this exploration of this world and the characters that were in it and what happened to them, or what is happening to them, that I think is a key component of making a Metroidvania. The world feels lived in. And that's a lot of what I think it is.
No, that's an amazing point. Like, and it again just it appeals to our sense. Like, if this is a genre you enjoy playing, it's like, yes, you're exploring, but also it scratches the itch to want to know why. Why is this world as it is? You know, whether living or dead.
I think every game we've listed has that moment of, well, wait, what is this? Whether it's Metroid, where you've landed on an alien planet, what do you have ahead of you? What is all this weird stuff? Or it's Hollow Knight, where you're wandering through the ruins of a dying civilization. What led to this? Like, every one of them, they have these settings that make you question what happened here? Why is it like this? What's going on? And you answer these through your exploration.
And and occasional love notes you find.
I mean, yeah.
That is a thing. Well, and with, you know, it comes down to the developer wanting to, you know, how do they want to tell the story? Do they want to tell it through through like sidekick characters? Do they want to share with like a handful of surviving NPCs? Do they leave notes lying all over the place?
I mean, objectively, the best way to tell a story like that is through Cornifer. You want to have a Cornifer in every one of your games.
Yes, I will happily buy your maps, all of them.
You have maps for the places I haven't gone yet? I'd like those.
Yeah. Yeah, there's parts of that where you have to do his job for him.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the one of the best parts of Hollow Knight is just when you find him hiding behind a bush in Deep Nest, and the map is literally like one room that you're in, and you have to fill the rest of it out yourself.
Yep.
He's like, I'm not going in there, so you can buy a blank piece of paper from me. And it's just the best.
It does. It's like little moments like that which like flip the script a little bit. It's like, oh, you want the map? No, sorry. No.
That's a problem. I'm leaving this place because this place seems a lot like hell. So if you want to go through, if you could sell me a map afterwards, I would appreciate it.
Hang on a minute. And then we have the one I just started. Like, I finished Ender Lilies today, and I started Astalon Tears of the Earth, which has a mechanic of, it's a Metroidvania, but you control 3 characters, and you have to swap between them. So you only play as one at a given moment.
I love games that do that kind of shit. That is right up my alley.
Like, the last game that I played, which did something like that I can just immediately recall, is a platforming series called Trine.
Yep.
So this is not a mechanic I see very often in a Metroidvania, where, like, the way the world is designed requires the unique abilities of a party to advance.
So Winged 41, just to answer your thing. Just because it's a Castlevania doesn't necessarily mean it is a Metroidvania, because like the classic Castlevanias on the NES weren't, and same thing with N64. Lords of Shadow is definitely closer. I would have to replay them to figure out if they really do fit that definition, or if we kind of discount them the way we did earlier with the with my Dark Souls comparison. But it's definitely a lot closer to a 3D Metroidvania than a lot of other games. I could see that. Back to you, Brian.
I haven't played either of the Lords of Shadow games, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other. Sorry.
I'd say I have, but I didn't play them since they came out, so I have very, very hazy memories of them.
But yeah, just back to Astalon, Tears of the Earth. Just like,
Yes.
I'm very early in the game. I'm like an hour into the game, but it's like just very interesting how the map is set up where, you know, you've got these 3 party members, but there are some areas where it's like, you cannot pass through here because the character you're currently using can't jump that high, or doesn't have the ability to break this magic wall. So you have to go back to, you know, your last campfire, your checkpoint, swap character, and then go back to where you were trying to get to. Which I just thought was just an interesting mechanic.
It's definitely a game I need to take a look at. I think I might actually own it. I think I might have got it on a sale at one point. If I don't, it's definitely something that's been on my radar for quite some time. It's just, you know, there's only so much time for games.
Yeah. Yeah,
I have like 7 games right now that came out in the last recent time that I all have just piled up as, well, these are things I'm supposed to get to soon. Better get to that.
It's called the Eternal Backlog.
I'm usually pretty good about not having that. Like, the last several years, I've completed more games than I've added.
I was going to say, it was called the Eternal Backlog for a reason.
Mm-hmm. This might be the first year in quite some time that I add more games to the backlog than I remove.
Mm.
And I think it's because I'm working through a lot of longer games. Like, one of the games I'm going to be doing shortly is Elden Ring.
That's about 150. Yeah, that's about 150 hours you're not going to see get back.
Yep, that's.
I mean, I'm not. I severely doubt I'm going to be completionisting it. So
I wasn't trying to completion it either. I still spent about 150 hours on it.
Okay.
Well, keep in mind like this the blessing and a curse of an open world game. There's so much bullshit to do. So that's the blessing, the curse. There's so much bullshit to do.
Yeah. You got a point. You got a point. So I have a couple games I just want to mention in passing to make sure they get brought up. But for other influential indie Metroidvanias that we haven't talked about yet, you got Owlboy, you got Guacamelee, you got Salt and Sanctuary, you have The Messenger. Like, those are all ones that on some level were important to the genre going forward. That just we haven't brought up, and I don't know if we will, but I want to at least give them a shout out as if you're interested in the genre, those are all quality games to take a look at.
One that I keep seeing pop up, it's a game that came out almost a decade ago at this point, Rogue Legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have Guacamelee. I haven't played it.
I'd say Messenger is very interesting because it starts off as a fairly linear Ninja Gaiden game that opens up into a full Metroidvania when you get to like the 1/3 or halfway point.
That's an interesting take.
So it literally switches genres.
Yeah. That's
so. Also, there is time travel in the game, and what I find really interesting is they do what I always thought a video game should do. When you do time travel, start in 8-bit when you time travel or start 16-bit when you time travel to the past, go to 8-bit when you time travel to the future, go to 32-bit. Like, the art style changes when you go through time.
So Evoland, but not an RPG.
Basically.
Mm.
So, but that's definitely, like, that one got all the accolades. Like, it was one of the best indie games of the year. It probably something you might like, Brian. I haven't played it. I might someday, but I was never a fan of the old school Ninja Gaiden games. So
Messenger, I played and beat it. So
It came out 4 years ago.
that's when it came out. It was on Xbox Game Pass. Might still be on it actually. It's okay. It definitely leans more into the old school Ninja Gaidens than it does the Metroidvania stuff. I had fun with it, but like 10 hours at most, I think. Like, yeah, like 10 hours at most.
That's one I can't really argue about being a Metroidvania because that's literally what the developers have said.
And I agree with them. Like, it starts as Ninja Gaiden, and about halfway through, it turns into Metroidvania.
Yeah. So, but that's about all I had to bring up. Do you guys have some other things you want to talk about on it?
I also want to briefly mention that Metroid Dread's amazing. If you haven't bought it, you should buy it. Like, please. Buy Metroid Dread. Prove to Nintendo this is actually a genre and a game series worth caring about.
Yeah, let's all give our recommendations, as people probably would expect from earlier. Hollow Knight. You should really play it if you haven't yet. It is an excellent game. It is one of my favorite games of all time. It's one of the only games that I come back and replay. I very rarely replay games. I come back to Hollow Knight at least once a year.
I know Axiom Verge, we talked about it previously. I would also recommend Axiom Verge. I know there's a second one that came out relatively recently too.
Yeah, came out about 9 months ago.
Yeah, sounds about right. Again, that's gonna be more of your 2D type of like your 8-bit art style. So if you like a lot of the older, like the older Castlevanias, the older Metroids, like that would be that would be a thing. I would say go look at. I think that was pretty much it.
How about you, Brian? You got a recommendation for the listeners?
Oh, I mean, I wish that Moon Studios was not run by two very, very shitty people, because
I knew that. I was about. I almost started with. So, Brian, what can you recommend other than Ori?
Other than Ori, because Ori and the Blind Forest is one of my all-time favorite games. I'll recommend Ender Lilies as well. I think that's Ender Lilies. I think is it's hauntingly beautiful, but I also think it's a good if you're starting out in the genre, it's a good one to get into, because it doesn't. Some Metroidvanias can get a little crazy with the abilities and skills, and I think Ender Lilies gives you a nice array to play with. So that would definitely be my recommendation. That is not Ori and the Blind Forest. I would go with Ender Lilies. I just finished it. It's a beautiful game.
I'd say it looks gorgeous.
I hope that when you get the game, you have a blast with it.
I have no doubt in my mind I'm gonna have a blast with it, and you and I will have a nice long conversation when it comes. I think August is the date they're shooting for right now.
So it took me 24 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't 100% it. So that was how long it took me to get all of the endings. It was 24 hours.
Okay.
Not too bad at all.
Ender Lilies is not only on Steam; it is also on Switch.
Yep.
Probably on a bunch of other things too, but I at least know it's on Switch.
Yeah,
that's where my copy's coming.
Yeah, I know you got the you're getting the limited run games version. It is on it's on everything. Switch, yeah. PS4, Xbox, Xbox One, PC.
Mm-hmm. Did you say PlayStation? It's on PlayStation.
PS4. Yep.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. It's another thing. Multiple endings with Metroidvanias. Like, Hollow Knight's got multiple endings. Ender Lilies has multiple endings. Sundered has multiple endings.
I think when you have an exploration-based game, I think it just lends itself to multiple endings, because the more you explore, the more endings you get.
Oh yeah, that's entirely fair.
I mean, even talking about old school, the very first Metroid game. Well, the ending is how naked you can get Samus. It still had a different ending screen depending on what you did.
Yes, I can see that. Like, I just like particularly for Hollow Knight, it has like your multiple. You have like one ending which is basically like, okay, yeah, whatever, I'm just gonna leave. And
I mean, Symphony of the Night and Bloodstained both have full false finishes with a whole section of the game locked behind it.
I remember when I played Bloodstained, getting the false ending, and I'm like, my first thought was, what the fuck is this shit? And then I'm like, wait a minute, I still have I have a lot more game to go.
You never played Castlevania, so you didn't expect it.
That's exactly it.
Like, when I Symphony of the Night, that like half of the game is locked behind the false ending. So when I got to the end of Bloodstained, it's like, oh yeah, no, this is not the end.
Yeah, there's a false ending here.
I honestly, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more locked behind the false ending in Bloodstained.
So,
but like, it locked the end game area, but it was nowhere near as much material locked behind it as, say, Symphony.
And if I ever play Symphony of the Night, I don't know if because I still have my PS2, but if I have to see if it's on the PlayStation Network store on PS3.
Brian, I will tell you right now, you can go through everything else. When you get to the end of the game, it is a guide dang it moment. You have to read how to unlock the castle, because nobody is going to figure it out without that.
Okay. If I get it. So
yeah. But you should play it. Go play it.
Go play it, because I have never finished a Metroid or a Castlevania game, so maybe I should play one of the games that lends itself to the title, to the genre.
Yeah. Yes, so Winged 41, Nier certainly has an entire alphabet of endings.
So I think I'm good. Do you guys have any other final thoughts?
No. Metroidvanias are good. Go play some.
Yes, do that.
Do the things.
I will bring up one thing, though it's very short. I do love both Metroidvania and Souls-like as these modern genres when it felt like there were no new genres, and they are much more descriptive. So most genres are mechanics based inherently, but both Metroidvania and Souls-like both are more describing the feel of the game for how they are. Such as Metroidvania, it does have a couple different guidelines that all of them have, but it's all for the sake of exploration. So same thing with Souls-like, it's all for the sake of difficulty. I think it's wonderful that we're still creating new genres at this point that resonate with new gamers and new ways of seeing video games. Even if, like Metroidvania, they have their roots in games that were created 30 years ago.
Just goes to show you that it's not dead. we can still make great games using the old styles.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that the indies stepped into this, because we had two of the biggest companies, Konami and Nintendo, doing this style of game, but doing them very infrequently and kind of letting the ground lay fallow for years at a time. And the indie industry isn't quite the right word, but indies basically went, well, there's a big desire for these kinds of games, and they're not the companies that created this genre have kind of put them aside and aren't really doing anything with them. Let's do something with them. And I love that. I think all of the games we've had has proven that Metroidvanias have legs if Konami and Nintendo just decide they want to make more of them.
You just gotta put effort into your games, people. Just actually do the job we're paying you for, that you should be being paid properly for.
Well, let's be honest here. Konami is only getting paid for pachinko machines.
That's true.
They're making shitloads of money with them. It's hard for I hate what Konami is right now. It's hard to argue with their success. Pachinko machines make bank.
Konami wants to make money. Just license out your IP to other people that actually do something with it. But they don't want to.
It's why I've said there are only two acquisitions in video games I support. One was the buying out of Activision Blizzard, because I feel like it's the only way to fix the issues in that.
Fix that garbage fire.
Yeah, and the other one is somebody either buying Konami or buying Konami's IPs, because they've proven they're never going to do anything with them.
Yeah, and then the problem is, if you want to try and buy Konami's IPs, that means you're having to fork over an extra $5 billion just for the Metal Gear Solid name. So,
well, that's the thing. You could go, we're gonna buy all of them and leave them with Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
You could literally leave that and still pick up their other ones, and it wouldn't be that much.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Metal Gear Solid, you could buy
that
Konami.
Much.
You could buy Konami for probably 500 million if it wasn't for Metal Gear Solid. And I feel like I'm probably being over generous when I'm saying 500 million for everything other than Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to end this episode, by shitting on Konami. Well done, gentlemen.
I mean, if we could end every episode that way.
Yes, sounds good to me.
DLC.
If we can shit on either Konami, NFTs and cryptocurrency, or loot boxes, that's how we should end.
We're going to become a meme. So yes, there we go. Alrighty, but before we close everything out, just want to say once again that if you want more downloadable content, every single episode can be found on our website, dlcpodcast.com. I will once again hit the chat with that. Also, every single episode can also be found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. So all the different ways to get downloadable content into your ears. So it remains for me to thank everyone in the chat who chimed in. Thank you, Wing41. We had Schlifty earlier. And also, of course, our Ron duet, Ron and Ronny, for
always a pleasure
coming on and yakking about Metroidvanias. So we will see you next month. But until then, I am Brian. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'll see you next week.